and kind of gets their way, come in and try to fix the problem. And we're kind of seeing that all over the place. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another YouTube stream. It's been a while. Yes, we're back. We almost dodged World War III. We had one of the most incredible meetings of world leaders happen over the weekend. Trump met face to face with Vladimir Putin. And here's a surprising fact for you guys. This is the first time that the president of the United States has met face to face with Vladimir Putin since this war has started. Biden never saw Putin one time. 1 million people have died. There's real stakes here. So there's a lot of narratives going around about all the world leaders coming over to the White House, which is unprecedented. You really don't have things like that happen unless it's a G7 or a G20 meeting. An impromptu last-minute call that the president of the United States assembled the Avengers. They're saying that it's to negotiate the peace deal and kind of negotiate some of the terms of the ceasefire or peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. I think it was a leverage point to sort of flex the cohesion of the NATO and the US alliance in order to have more leverage when negotiating with Putin. Because from a distance, you have a bunch of fucking bumbling idiots in every country. Germany, UK, you have Keir Starmer, his dumbass. You have all of these people with their own self-interest, seemingly no communication or no coordination between them. And so Putin's like, okay, if they're divided, then they're not going to be strong enough to basically stand up to me. And so this show of strength and show of unity, I really think is more of like a reminder to all the countries that may be sort of associating themselves with Russia or sort of siding with them in this conflict, that this coalition is still strong. And this is the last people that you want to mess with. So I think it was a show of force, but I tried to get as much information about these peace talks as possible. I'll tell you guys this. I really tried. And there was not a single coherent, like definite thing that came out of those talks. And there's not a single goddamn piece of solid negotiating, specifics that were established. The Ukraine-Russia thing, there's 3 main considerations here. All right. To understand, kind of catch you guys up on where we're at. Russia is winning, and they're beating the shit out of Ukraine. Had the US and NATO not supplied weapons, diplomatic cover, and money to Ukraine, Russia would have taken over the entire area much sooner, probably in a week. The only reason that Russia has not completely stormed into Kyiv and taken over Ukraine is because of the support of NATO and the US. So that's where we're at, is that this is basically World War III, except instead of fighting direct, and much like World War II, it starts off as a proxy, where you have supporting nations, the allied nations. The US didn't get involved until Pearl Harbor. I mean, there was some involvement here and there. There was money, diplomatic cover, and support in that sense. But there wasn't direct troops on ground from the US. And so this is basically like a World War III scenario, and we're inching closer and closer to it. Except this time, like, the Nazis didn't have nukes. Okay, that would have been a bad day. You can't really push somebody around when they got the red button. The US and Russia control about 90% of the world's nuclear supply. So inching towards World War III, where we're playing this proxy game where Russia is fighting Ukraine, but really we're the ones funding Ukraine, so we're fighting Russia. But, this is a sleepwalking into World War III, which is sleepwalking into a nuclear war. So you guys understand how high stakes this is? Like, we're literally on the tightrope. And if these guys want to, if those world leaders that all took a picture with Trump in the White House, if they fuck this up, we're on the line, because they have bunkers. Now, I don't know about you guys. Trading's been going great, but I ain't been going, buying a bunker great. So really, we're the ones left holding the bag. So this whole show of force, so there's 3 main considerations that are now on the table, because the only way out for Ukraine is to surrender. if they continue to fight until the last Ukrainian man, the average Ukrainian soldier right now is, I think, like 40 or 45 years old. They've conscripted they keep raising the maximum age limit for you could be 55 years old and still come fight in the army. That they're running out of soldiers. They have all of the Ukrainian fighting age men have died. There is no way out for them because if they do not concede to Russia's demands, then Russia will just take all of it. Right? And so there's land considerations first. There's peace and sort of like a security guarantee so that if Russia antagonizes Ukraine again, then there's some kind of uh, guarantee from the NATO or the US alliance that they will support, either through weapons or through direct force. And then the third one, what would it be? We'll stick to those two for now. Those are two pretty big ones. So if you like the area that Russia is fighting over, the Donbass region, Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, these are primarily Russian-speaking areas. They're mostly Russians. And then in census that was done 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when asked if they would like to be a part of Russia or Ukraine, most of them voted to be a part of Russia. Now they were being mistreated or something like that, whatever it is. The real underlying thing is those same properties that are Russian speaking also have most of the natural gas, most of the minerals, most of the valuable rare earth energy minerals that are going to be, obviously useful for batteries in the future, and also just oil and things like that. Like natural gas deposits in those eastern parts of Ukraine, extremely valuable. Right? This kind of gets into the whole, like, why was Hunter Biden working for a Ukrainian energy company, Burisma? And like, what was kind of the whole play there? The US has had a very deliberate stake, not only in being next door to Russia, but also in kind of having dibs on those energy deposits. Now, all that aside, Russia wants that land. All right. This is about 20% of Ukraine is what Russia is asking for. But here's the thing, is that Russia is winning. So you can't exactly tell the winning side to just, to take it or leave it. Putin says, I'll keep this war going as long as it takes. Like, we're going to win regardless. So you guys either give up 20% of your land now, or you keep fighting and then we eventually take all of it. Western support has died down. The average person just is sick and tired of funding this war, going to work, working your ass off just to have your money sent over to corrupt oligarchs over in Ukraine. Half of it gets stolen. The other half gets sent to, think tanks and consultants. And then by the time it actually makes it to the ground, we're funding the death of more young men. So the West is basically fed up with that shit. And so this is the deal. And I think that's why Trump did that whole show of force thing, because it was like, okay, well, if we don't have any negotiating leverage in terms of the actual battlefield, showing our potential force because of our unity, that might actually incentivize Putin to think twice about just kind of pushing his weight around. He might realize the seriousness of this. Is it going to work? I don't fucking think so. Did anything tangible come out of that meeting? No, not as far as I can see. If there's some kind of closed door conversations that happen somewhere that we still haven't, we're not privy to, we'll know soon enough. But as for now, the war continues. Now, on the other front, between Gaza and Israel has finally said the quiet part out loud. They want to do a full takeover of Gaza City. This is their last incursion. They're going to go in there and basically flatten the last like 3 buildings and a pizza shop that's still standing somewhere. They got word from the drone. They're like, there's still a building somewhere that hasn't been completely demolished. They're like, unacceptable. We're going to go in there and make sure every last one is done. So they're going to go in there and do their last incursion. And then once that is done, the media narrative will completely spin. There's going to be a complete marketing push to sort of, what I really think is going to happen is everything kind of points towards they're going to scapegoat Netanyahu, right? Because whenever you guys are, whenever I see criticism on the news, I'm not seeing criticism of Israel, the Israeli government, Smotrich, the people in the government that are actually calling for these genocides. It's all being put on Netanyahu. making him the bad guy, putting it all on one person so that Israel can sort of skate free after this. They can send, Netanyahu over war crimes to the Hague, and then he can be tried for war crimes or whatever. And then Israel gets to basically skirt off free and own Gaza. So this is their last push. They're going to take full control over Gaza. And I think this was the plan all along. I think this was the plan all along. Allow October, I mean, this is going to be controversial, but obviously with the most advanced kind of surveillance country in the world, the one that supplies all the technology, surveillance, infrastructure for most of the intelligence services. They have some of the most intelligent intel, not only like how do I like they're literally just the most advanced when it comes to intelligence, knowing what's going on at all times. The country's like goddamn 20 miles from side to side. October 7th happened for 2.5 hours before help showed up. Something about that still is not adding up to me. I need answers. Now, that aside, I think that was part of the plan the whole time. Allow it to happen so that there's an excuse to say Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. Every time you kill like 1,000 children in a hospital somewhere, you'll be like, oh, but it was a Hamas somewhere. Hamas. Just throw out a word and then just basically get away with mass slaughter. So this has been an absolute disaster. It's honestly like sick to my stomach. I barely talk about it because, bro, these are really just people living that just walking on the street and then just absolute Armageddon apocalypse for no fucking reason. You just be sitting there waking up every day asking, what is this? How is this even possible? And we're funding it. You're at work right now, working your ass off for some schlob somewhere. Your manager's a slob. You're out there working right now. Half of your check is going to get sent to slaughter of people, kids. That's fucked up. And I think this rebranding that Israel's trying to do, I'll give you guys one piece of that propaganda rebranding right now. There are massive protests happening in Israel right now against Netanyahu to end the genocide in Gaza. The protests all over the country in Israel, they said it was 300,000 people. Now, I'm pretty sure the population of Israel is like fucking 3 million. That's damn near 10% of the country showed out for these protests, right? They're all dead. Not the protesters, the Gazans. Like, yo, y'all showed up you're too fucking late. But now you guys see the rebranding by showing that it's not all Israelis that were supporting this, right? It was the corrupt government of Netanyahu that perpetrated this, and the people, they're the peaceniks who basically, ended the Vietnam War. Like, that's not gonna fucking work. I don't know about you guys, but that's not gonna fly. Can't just rebrand after literally committing the worst genocide of the century, the worst crime of our lifetime. People got a long memory. So that one is, I feel like there's just a lot of distractions happening right now. There's Obama, the whole Russiagate situation. There's this emphasis on ending the Ukraine war. There's all of these different things that are very, very high stakes. Conveniently, while Israel commits its last incursion into Gaza and basically finishes the job. And then after they're done with their basically their total slaughter, then they will allow international journalists to come in and verify for themselves. Then they'll basically repaint the story. They'll basically cover up a few things. When the whole place has been demolished into rubble, there is very little sort of like evidence that you're leaving behind. You're basically just burning the evidence behind you. One thing you can't hide is that the entire place is flattened to the ground. So I like to see them untangle themselves out of that one. That's gonna be a doozy. I want to see what kind of mental gymnastics they're able to pull. And I want to see how many people fall for that shit, because I think it's very little. Okay, so that's what's happening. Now let's get into financial news. The biggest thing happening is Jerome Powell speaks at the Jackson Hole Conference tomorrow, or the Jackson Hole Symposium. Now, there's a few things happening in the background here between Trump and Powell. So Trump is trying to sue Powell right now for being ass at his job, just basically being trash at his job. Now, because the Fed has this independent agency clause, and they're independent from political pressures, and so they're sort of immune from the bullying of Trump. Trump can't actually sue him for not doing a good job. As long as Powell was doing things that are in line with the function of his duties, even if they're the wrong decisions, as long as they were part of his administrative duties as the chairman, then he can't be sued for it. So Trump is like, okay, I'll find a workaround. So Powell is trying to renovate and rebuild the Fed building in DC. Now, the Fed building in DC, in case you guys haven't been to DC, it's like basically on the water. It's basically built like the whole area where it's at used to be a creek. Okay. And then they're building this massive basement like underground, right? A very expensive, expansive project. And so Trump is basically, he shifted the lawsuit to Powell doesn't have the authority to basically waste $400 million to build a building because that's not his job. He's the chairman. His job is to basically conduct monetary policy. And then within his duties, within the Fed, there's the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, to convene with some of those key members of the key presidents, and then to make decisions on the target range for the Fed funds rate. And then your two basically mandates are price stability and maximum employment. No part of that says waste $400 million of taxpayer funds on a fucking new building. And so I'm kind of with Trump on that one. But I don't like the pettiness of Trump is trying to sue him into cutting rates. People, we're going to get 2 rate cuts this year if nothing changes. This is what everybody is watching right now. We were supposed to get 3 rate cuts, 2 to 3. And we were expecting one of them before the summer, one after. It turns out no rate cuts in the summer, no rate cuts before. The first rate cut is probably going to be in September. It's going to be about 25 basis points. Right? Let me see if I have this math right. I think every percentage point that they drop in the Fed funds rate reduces our debt liability to pay for the interest on our national debt, our interest burden this year by $1 trillion. If I'm not mistaken, I think if it goes from 4.5% like it is now down to 3.5%, that's the interest rate. We save $1 trillion in interest expense this year because obviously the percent that we owe on the debt that's outstanding goes down. And so Scott Bessent and Trump want him to drop rates about 1.5 points. Now, this would look great on Trump's, resume on his report card. First year, inflation was at 1.9. The tariffs didn't crash the economy. Stock market is at all-time highs. And we're in a surplus for once because he was able to actually bring in revenue in July. We didn't have a deficit. We had a surplus for once. The tariff revenue compensated for our overspending, which is very miraculous. So Trump wants this for political reasons, him and Bessent. It would make them look really good. It would save them a lot of money, and it would help with their leverage for the whole tariff play because it would make it more advantageous to basically do business in the US. Now, the reason that Jerome Powell is not dropping rates is because we just came out of the worst inflation scare that we've ever seen. Because inflation is like one of these words that, like, as somebody who's been studying economy, I was always looking at inflation, but it didn't like nobody was talking about inflation. The word, no one knew what the fucking word meant until 2020. But what most people don't realize is before the whole COVID fiasco and before they bastardized the printing press and basically like got us 10 times deeper in this shithole, in 2018, Jerome Powell identified that we were already in an inflation crisis. All right, I can show you guys this on the chart. You can go back to 2018. And this is when Jerome Powell basically told everybody that, like, from the 2008 financial crisis up until the 2018 moment, we had 0% interest rates. It was the ZIRP policy, 0% interest. And then we had quantitative easing, which is just pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into the economy. And so we just had 14 years of nothing but up, nothing but up, nothing but up, nothing but up. Some slight in between in 2015 with the Euro crisis, but we don't talk about that. Europe sucks anyways. Okay. So 2018, Jay Powell tells or hints that he's going to raise rates for the first time in 14 years. The party was going to be over. They're going to turn off the music. They're going to pull the alcohol. And then you kind of had the market reaction. They had an allergic reaction. And then everybody kind of continued because they didn't really see like a real conviction from Powell to go through with it. Then September rolls around, he actually raises rates again. And then the market just completely dumps. And so Powell identified that we were already in an inflation problem in 2018. And the only reason he backed out is because the markets punished him for it. Wall Street basically put so much pressure on him that he had to turn back. And then we kind of started to see a rebound. And then we had COVID. And when COVID happened, everything went out the window. They printed a record amount of money, pumped trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy. They dropped rates right back down to zero. And you guys see from COVID up until 2022, this thing was just in a one-way motion. And then Jerome Powell comes back in and he's like, yeah, we're fucked. So we don't have a choice but to raise rates. Now, this is the first time, again, in 14 years that he's stopping the party. And the drug addicts, start having withdrawals. This thing was brutal. It was 2022. Powell was committed to raising rates. They went from 0 to 5%, or 0 to about like 3.5%, and then they basically raised the rest in 2023. In 2023, Powell announced that there was no more rate hikes. And so just the relief of the pause was enough to help the market rebound. By the end of 2023, the market was already at all-time highs. Okay. So now let's kind of fast forward here. Trump gets in. So we've had high interest rates since about 2023. They've set the rates at 5%, and we've kind of just been holding since. So we've had these high interest rates, and the markets haven't collapsed. Trump takes office in January 2025. The markets crash because of the fear of these tariff policies that he's just kind of laying out. He's just kind of shooting from the hip. 100% for you, 5%. And there's no cohesion or clarity. That made the markets nervous. We had a sell-off. And then Liberation Day, the deadline for the tariffs that actually, when they came into effect, this is where the market rebounded because Trump did a 90-day pause on every country but China. And so that market relief of like, we were all expecting, it's like Y2K. Okay, the clock strikes midnight. You're expecting everything to catch, to explode and catch on fire, and nothing happens. Everyone's like, oh, I guess it's time to buy again. And that's what we've seen. Now, the 90 days is up. Now we get to where we are today. The 90 days is up. The tariffs are now in effect. China still has these aggressive tariffs. And Powell is very likely to be asked about this. I don't think he's going to comment too much on the tariff policy, but he is going to comment on, like, Powell has been finding ways to comment on the political things without actually directly addressing them. So I'll give you an example. One of his mandates is maximum employment, right? And so he can't talk about the immigration policy because they'll ask him, hey, how do you think that Trump deporting all these migrants is affecting the labor supply, right? Because if there's less people available to work and all these jobs are no longer available, is that affecting the numbers? And Jerome Powell said, I can't comment on, our job is fiscal policy and monetary policy. And we can't comment on things of politics. That's Congress's job, whatever. But then he'll kind of turn that around to look at the employment numbers and he'll make slight digs about the total labor supply. He'll say this is not a demand shock. There's plenty of demand for jobs, but we're seeing like a rapid decrease in the supply of labor. So he'll emphasize the fact that it's a supply side problem. Like the only reason that there's less people working is because of the immigration thing. Americans didn't just magically start this isn't the awakening. Like people didn't just start disappearing. And that's why the labor supply, like there's less people available in the pool of people to work. That was 8.9 million. There's a lot of shit that just pisses me off. Trump keeps talking about we're going to create new jobs. We're going to make 500,000 new jobs. There's just 8.9 million open jobs in the US. Ain't nobody taking them. The fuck you're going to make new jobs for so more people cannot take them? This whole thing is ridiculous. Jerome Powell won't address any of this shit because that stuff is actually consequential to the economy. So God forbid Jerome Powell actually addresses it. What he'll likely talk about tomorrow, like the beef between him and Trump is getting so serious that it's testing Jerome Powell's ability to remain impartial. His whole stance, and like every Fed chairman should be the same way, but he has made it a priority after 2008 to kind of preserve the reputation of the Fed, to not politicize the Federal Reserve, to not be seen rubbing shoulders with politicians, to not be buddy buddy with them, because it shows a conflict of interest and it's going to affect your ability to conduct sound monetary policy. This feud between him and Trump is going to test his resolve to see if he's actually going to stick to that script. They're going to ask him and be like, "Oh, I'm not going to comment about that. We're here to do our job. I'm focused on my job, me and my papers and my books." If he shows full focus towards his administrative responsibilities and then kind of just dismisses the personal beef between him and Trump, that would be perfect. If he starts throwing slight digs, if he starts commenting on fiscal policy, if he starts commenting on executive policy, if he starts kind of throwing digs here and there, it shows a very big split, guys. If Trump and Powell are friends, there's a very good chance we're getting those two rate cuts. If Trump wants to, or if Powell wants to piss off Trump and really get back at him, all he has to do is cancel one of those rate cuts. It would be completely devastating. There's not shit that Trump can do about it. And you know, what else can you do? Powell has that authority. Trump can't fire Powell. He appointed him unless he does something wrong. Wrong in the sense of illegal or against the bylaws of the agency. Right? So Trump, Powell beefing. Powell has the printing press. He's got the button. He's got the finger on the button for the interest rates and the printing press. If Trump pisses him off, he can actually hold out. Because the 25 basis point cut is not going to do shit for us trying to buy houses. Like, okay, so the loan goes from 7% down to 6.5%. Great. I'm still not buying the house. But in terms of the national debt, in terms of our interest payments that we owe, the debt burden that we have to service this year, $1 trillion wiped off the board, 25 basis points, every one of these rate cuts would be $250 billion saved in interest expense that we would have to otherwise pay to bondholders and other debt holders and on the national debt. That's fucking nuts. I understand what Besson and Trump are saying. We can't fucking do it because inflation is what will completely eat a country alive. You can go through recessions and depressions. It'll suck. People will starve. There will be food lines. You'll make it. If there's a hyperinflation crisis, you get Venezuela. Right? Venezuela was a very rich country. They discovered oil there, and the price of oil had started to skyrocket. So they were able to just basically get rich off of just natural gold under their feet. Just think about Dubai, etc. And so what they do is they have so much money and so much leftover money, they create social programs, give everyone free education, free healthcare, all the social services. And then one day the price of gas drops, price of oil drops. Their local currency is no longer worth anything because it was backed by this sort of oil trade that they had. And so what they have to do is they have to print more of their local currency in order to purchase or in order to trade it basically for another currency that actually is worth, let's say dollars, something that's worth something, so they can put it in their bank and actually back their economy. And so you start printing just to maintain your economy for like a month, and you've completely ruined your currency. Japan is dealing with this, but on a very slow death. All right. So what happens with inflation is that, like in Venezuela, you have wheelbarrows of money that weren't worth shit. People were burning money just for heat, It was like piles and piles of paper that were worthless. So that's like the worst case extreme hyperinflation. Inflation in our sense would just be most people are already living paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans don't have $400 for an emergency. And there's a lot of Americans using debt, using credit cards in order to finance just basic living expenses, groceries and the rest. Now imagine everything goes up in price 10%. Not just the grocery bill goes from 200 to 220. The grocery bill goes from 200 to 237. The gas bill goes from 32 to 48 or whatever. And you keep adding up all these things. There's no money left over at the end of the month. Matter of fact, there's negative money left over at the end of the month because whatever your boss is going to tell you, they're going to give you a raise to keep up with inflation. It's not going to keep up with the price increases. So who does this benefit if they cut rates? Stocks are going to boom. Crypto is going to fucking boom. Housing prices are going to boom, right? So if you own assets, then you'll get rich. And all of you guys should make that a priority because it's the only way to wealth. You're not going to earn income. You're not going to earn your way to wealth. All right. So read a book. Building actual, like tangible wealth, like the assets, like, okay, income is taxed. Half your money's gone. You work your ass off. If you're a hardworking person, honest person, 60 years on the job, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an electrician, you work at Walmart, whatever it is, half your money is being taxed because labor is punished in this country. Capitalism is rewarded. So if you're investing your money, then you can pay capital gains tax. Or you can pay long-term capital gains tax, which is even lower. You kind of do pass-throughs through your companies and kind of get some kind of tax advantages there. So if you own assets and everything starts going up like crazy, like in 2020, then you're rich overnight. But now what happens is that everything is more expensive. If the rich get richer, they start buying stuff, the price of stuff goes up. Now, the people that are living paycheck to paycheck that don't own assets, they're getting poorer because now the price of everything at the grocery store is going up. And now the disparity between the wealthy and the poor grows so wide that there's going to be a reaction. There's going to be some kind of violent reaction. Inflation is that pervasive, right? So that's why Jerome Powell is literally through the pressure of Trump breathing down his neck and stepping on his neck, basically. He's not folded yet because the risk on the other side of letting this thing happen is that bad. Someone's got to fucking do it. Shout out to Jay Powell. He's kept rates high. The higher we can keep them, the better. We need to get the markets back to a reasonable place where you can't just borrow a shit ton of money for a low rate and then buy back stock and then do all this manipulative stuff so that you can kind of, increase the capital valuation of your company and manipulate it through Series A, Series B, Series C funding. Or if you're in the public markets, do another funding round or do stock splits or buy back your own stocks. All of these manipulative tactics of using revenue or using money that you have or that you borrowed for fuck's sake for low to go and basically boost your stock instead of actually investing in the company, hiring more people. Like instead of investing back into the economy, you're just manipulating your own stocks. This has led to a massive mispricing of the stock market. Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, all of these are mispriced, people. I'm telling you this right now. Because if you take the earnings of these companies and then you take let's just say that you take like a present value of future cash flows model, which is kind of how you can value a company. You basically look at the next 5 years of revenues, and then you put that in today's dollars. So it's the present value of future cash flows. And you can find an enterprise value or like a sort of total valuation of a company. And so if you do that, typically technology companies trade on something called a multiple, which is like a multiple of your earnings. So like they'll trade 5x or 10x more than what they're actually, what they're actually bringing in, because they hope that in the future they're going to reach that number. All these companies have just gone ballistic. Some of these companies are trading at fucking 200x. And so when you take the free money away and they can't just like borrow from the bank at 0% and go do this bullshit, when you actually have to like do business for fuck's sake, everything gets better. You get a more honest pricing, you get a repricing. Now, somehow, some way, I think foreign investment is still pushing the stock market higher. I really think that that's kind of the big thing when Trump started to announce all of these big, number one, the tariff policies, obviously kind of flexing America, but also the big investments from, let's say, SoftBank and Masayoshi Son, 500 billion, and Apple's going to invest 500 billion. And then there was that thing with Sam Altman from OpenAI. They all got together and sang Kumbaya. They all pledged 500 billion, to invest in AI and tech. America was talking about onshoring our semiconductor production, right? So a lot of money flooded in here. I don't think that this is the U.S. companies sort of like stock manipulation. I honestly think that the reason the stock market continued to bounce, continued to go up was because of the foreign investments. Now, because of the tariff policies coming in and the ambiguity, we're seeing a little bit of release. I don't think foreign people like understand sarcasm. Like when Trump and Powell are beefing, these motherfuckers are either like listening to a translation or reading subtitles. Now I'll let you know when you read the transcript of what these guys have been saying to each other, this shit sounds really fucking serious. And if you have $100 billion locked up in US equities, you're paying attention to every blink, every word, every breath that he takes. And so I think that this is really like a sentiment thing. This sell-off, I think, is very appropriate, right? The market was booming for a very long time. Everybody's expecting it to keep going. Jackson Hole's coming around. Everybody's loading up for buys, and the market continues to push to the downside. Now that we've reached the bottom of the range here, hold on. Whoa. No, almost. We're almost at the bottom of the range. The 88 is sitting right down here. Interesting. Damn, could the market rebound from here? Possibly. All right, let me show you guys what I'm looking at here. Whenever I go to the higher time frames, to put it simply, I'm just looking for higher lows and higher highs. So by definition, as long as the market is continuing to establish a higher high, right? So a higher peak, as well as higher floors and new support, then the market is still technically on an uptrend, and we have to respect that that's our main bias. Once the market breaks this previous support, then officially we can shift our bias. So as of right now, the market is still establishing a higher support, meaning by definition it's still bullish. Now, if the market breaks below and then comes up for a lower high, that's all we need. Okay, now the peaks are getting lower and the lows are getting lower. We have a shift in momentum, which shows a change in direction. So as of right now, the market is still bullish, treated as such. We still have a little bit of room to the 88, so don't get too crazy. Yeah, that's what I got. On the smaller time frames, I have both the sell option ready and the buy option ready. Cool. Any questions? We good to go? I'm ending the live stream. Ain't nobody on this thing. I can't say Zelensky and wing of Putin, and I'm pretty sure I can't curse in the first 3 seconds of the streams.